All right.
Got it.
All right. So, welcome to the Blue Ribbon Project, a podcast hosted by myself, Dr. Donald James, the Executive Director for CITE. And I'm really excited because today we have a terrific guest, Mr. Stephen Ritz, who is an amazing, sometimes disruptive individual out in the field. He runs a CBO, the Bronx Green Machine. He's the founder. It came about as a result of any number of different topics that he's going to, I think, talk about today. I visited the Bronx Green Machine a couple of weeks ago. It's also been visited by chancellors, mayors, I think the first lady at one point, Michelle Obama. Stephen's story is amazing. He brings a lot to the table. He's a psych grad, so that's exciting for us that the psych grad has gone on to do something amazing. So Stephen's got a book, The Power of a Plant. So I think he'll probably talk about that a little bit today. This is Stephen. Stephen, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. I know you got a lot going on and there's some exciting things, some things you'll be able to share with us today and some things that you can't. Could you just talk to us a little bit about your CBO, how you got there? And,
Sure.
it'll be a natural flow.
Good. So, good morning, Donald, and hello, CITEX, and everybody else out there. Super excited to be here with you today. I am coming to you live from what is known as the National Health, Wellness, and Learning Center at CS 55, which is also our home base of Green Bronx Machine. So it's Green Bronx Machine, www.greenbronxmachine.org. But simply put, a little bit of context, and Don, it was so great to have you here. Literally, not too long ago, but January just feels like it's been a year for a variety of reasons here in the Bronx in New York City. That's a part of why we exist for sure, but I certainly want to acknowledge what has happened because to not do that would be wrong. But here we are at the National Health, Wellness, and Learning Center. This is a classroom in a 113-year-old building, once the former library, which went out of service in the 1970s and became a storage facility. And I converted it on my own time, on my own dime. And I don't say that to impress you, but say that because if I can, you can, and everybody who's watching this has the ability to do something great. And that's what this is about. Into a classroom that has been visited by people from 60 countries and around the world, and has really been the hotbed for DIY hacking yourself into innovation. So what goes on here? Well, we have a farm, a whole commercial farm, a whole classroom. We have a complete mobile classroom kitchen. But this school, CFT5, which when I got here and I came to volunteer, so let me be clear about that, was one of the poorest performing schools in all of the city. And in just a few short years, we are outperforming citywide and statewide benchmarks in all performance indicators and moved from, developing to proficient and well-developed in all of the 10 criteria for the New York State and New York City school review process. So for those of you who are embarking on your leadership journey, it is entirely possible to do something great. It is entirely possible to make epic happen. And that's what this work is all about. And, I've always said that no matter where you're listening or where you're tuning in from, there's a Bronx in every city, in every nation. And, not only are communities like mine under-resourced, and that's a whole, we are also over-extracted. So the work that we like to do is really in the community, of the community, for the community, by the community. Yes, we are a nonprofit, but I'm a full-time volunteer. I'm a big believer that there is, if you will, a nonprofit industrial complex that is getting fat and fed off the dysfunction of public schools, and that has to stop. I am also the believer that the greatest lever this nation has for equity is public education. And if you are not supporting public education and you are not adding to it, you are pulling from it, often, very selfishly, under the pretense of pretending to be a savior of the neighborhood and the community. So, I am disruptive, make no doubt about it. I'm outspoken. I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. And I also believe that in communities like mine, if you're not pissing people off, you're not working hard enough. So with that, I'll let you open it up to some questions.
So Steve, clearly you've got opinions about the way the world works around public ed and what's happening. In many ways, I agree. I think that public ed has become a cash cow for a lot of folks in the private world. So let's talk a little bit about what you've actually done to disrupt that. So you've shared with me the stories about how you started growing in the Bronx and what that meant for the students. You got the school to perform at higher levels without test prep. So this wasn't about test prep. This was about other things and about preparing students to do other things when they leave. So why don't you talk a little bit about that and maybe show us the hydroponic growing systems that you have there and how that works. People are probably saying, how could he possibly be growing? The book says over the years, you've grown 50 tons of food in the Bronx.
Now it's 30. We've grown 150,000 pounds of vegetables here in the South Bronx with adorable little children.
So talk to us a little bit about that and what you're actually doing with the kids.
So I like to say I'm the oldest sixth grader you'll ever meet. And so I kind of have that kind of boyish enthusiasm, but let's be clear, I've been teaching since the early 1980s in the South Bronx. I was waiting for the NBA to call me back. I'm still waiting. The Knicks haven't quite gotten it together yet, but I say that because I got into teaching accidentally. I was literally in Europe playing basketball, hoping to get a contract, blew out my knee. And before I left, my mom, also a teacher, suggested that I take the teaching exam because there was such a shortage of teachers in New York City at the time. And of course, this was the early 80s in the Bronx, where a bulk of it was still burnt and barren, and crack was just taking off. So you could only imagine what that was like after decades of heroin, and then the early 80s, with the massive flow of cocaine. So I got into teaching, basically, because I didn't have anything else to do. The Knicks didn't call me back, but the Board of Ed did. So I figured, wow, I needed a job. And it turned out that
they both needed you, but only the Board of Ed knew to call you.
Right, exactly. The Knicks still need me. Separate conversation, the second book. But literally, I found myself with many options to work because any school wanted anybody. There was such a dearth of vacancy. And I wound up one day showing up at a school, South Bronx High School, the original South Bronx High School before it became a campus. And, walking up the block and seeing a chair flying out of the window on the fifth floor, from the fifth floor, that seemed to be business as usual. Went for an interview and met a principal who never looked up from his desk and said, if you want the job, you could have it. And I felt like that was a good place to start for someone who didn't know what he was doing. And, all of the teacher training I had was, they gave me a stack of Delaney cards, one box of chalk, and a key to my classroom and a key to the teacher's bathroom. And I said, any training? And he said, yeah. I looked up, good luck. And that was it. And that was all the training I had. But I did have a very innate ability to connect with children. Because I was young. In many cases, I think I was 21. So in some cases, I had kids who were the same age as me. I was a phenomenal athlete at the time. We shared the same interests in music and culture. So I was kind of like a cool teacher, but very good at doing math, and was really good at engaging children around math, around, project-based activities, and connecting with them around a certain amount of credibility and moving them into what I call the zones of proximal development for school success, showing up, being on time, being respectful. But realize, at the time, the Bronx was burnt. It was no longer burning, it was burnt. However, hip hop was just starting to come into play. There were a lot of things that really made this burnt environment, if you will, very fertile soil for the ability to connect with children and take a moment and turn it into a movement. And literally, I became the guy that was able to connect with the most disconnected and started my career into public education, which came remarkably to a crashing halt several years later, simply because, as crack took off in the neighborhood, I was literally wanted to get as far away from the Bronx as possible. I was losing friends to both addiction and AIDS. The housing crisis, the violence was absurd. I couldn't afford to pay rent. And then the Board of Ed had this crazy concept. They wanted me to go to school to learn how to teach. And I was actually doing a good job and needed, I just didn't want to be bothered. So I walked away for a while and then came back in a very different context. And the rest has been history. The rest has really been history.
And so now that you're, at some point you decided you wanted to become an administrator, which is when you enrolled in a CITE program. And tell us a little bit about what happened after that.
Sure. So, I do want to give CITE credit, A, for accepting me, and B, for graduating me, but most importantly, C, for motivating me. I was a difficult student. I make no doubt about it. I saw the Board of Ed from the inside out as someone who understood all the potential, but really also saw all the liabilities. And I really, really, really wanted to make a difference. I'll never forget Joel Klein's famous speech, 50 years after the Brown versus Board of Education. That motivated me. Eric Nadelstern, for those of you who remember in New York City, he really motivated me. I had visions of what school can be and should be. And remarkably, 20 years past that, here I am, it's having built some schools overseas, having done some work here. So it really involved, kind of tackling some of this dysfunction and calling it out for what it is. I'm working hard to kind of disrupt some of the fiefdoms that I think we all know exist in certain school districts and certain communities, and really holding people and principals and myself accountable. And that's why I started this organization. And 2,200 living wage jobs later here in the South Bronx, I'm very proud of it. 150,000 pounds of vegetables later. Kids in the South Bronx who are vegans. Invites to the White House to meet His Holiness the Pope. An Emmy Award, an upcoming documentary, a best-selling book. I think, the proof is in the pudding that the Bronx is poised, ready, willing, and able to export its talent and diversity. And that's what this movement is all about, taking people who are apart from success, and make no doubt about it, I was very much apart from success. I had a principal who sent me to the rubber room, because I refused to change test scores. Because I refused to lie so that her report card could look better instead of being a truth teller about the inadequacies of what was going on in school. So, my story is one that I'm sure resonates with a lot of people, but we are the ones that we are waiting for. And, to everyone who's tuning in today, I urge you to think, if not us, who? And if not now, when? So I move with a sense of urgency, purpose, and accountability to myself and the community.
So that's really interesting that you talk about a couple of different things there, not the least of which is, and CITE loves the fact that it produces people that are willing to question authority, right? And then put themselves in positions to actually make change, right? That's really important. And one of the things that I know the professors and the head of the program, St. Rose and CITE partner, and have been doing this for years. It's the largest admin program in the state, and have produced tremendous graduates such as yourself. What I really found interesting in what you had to say was this idea that you produced students who then went off into these other types of jobs, right? And then they became vegans or vegetarians. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you prepare them for the workforce?
So, first and foremost, when I started this work, and, I am not a farmer. Let me be clear. People consider me to be an urban farmer. I'm doing a lot of work on the mayor's transition team, and I'm really excited about our new mayor and new chancellor. So let me give them big ups. Not that I wasn't excited about our prior chancellor either. Having someone from my hometown rise to the highest office within the institution, to me, is something that we can all be proud of. But
By the way,
David,
Maisha was a psych grad as well.
Oh, well, there you go. I didn't know that. What cohort was she in?
I don't know the cohort.
I will
off the top
share
of my head.
with you this, Donald. To the credit of CITE and the vast eclectic group of students that you attract for a variety of reasons, I stay in touch with quite a few people from my cohort. And remarkably, the people who I thought were going to be heroes then are heroes now. And we were a smaller group of outliers, if you will. But CITE did allow us the freedom and flexibility to pursue our interests and go in a different direction. Look, there are a lot of people for a lot of reasons who just wanted to climb the ladder, so to speak. You know, you want to get to the next pay grade, you want to get to the next promotion. There's nothing wrong with that, and I support that. But there were a bunch of us who, whether they were first generation students, the sons of immigrants, the sons of faculty, sons and daughters of faculty, or factory workers, you know, people whose parents cleaned homes for a living to send us to school. These were the people who I really resonated with. And it turns on, to this day, they have gone on to really create some of the most esteemed schools in New York City. Natasha Spad, if you're out there, holler, love you. She was one of mine. I could go on and on and on. Really disruptive people. And CITE gave us the flexibility. Now, case in point, how did I have that flexibility? You know, listen, I did not know much about leadership. I had visions for schools. I had visions of what schools should look like, but I also had a vision of what my community needed to look like because I lived there. I wasn't going home to the wealthy suburbs. I was actually walking to work, and I had visions of the way we could put young people to work in ways that benefited them, in ways that benefited the city, and ways that benefited the environment. Again, 2,200 living wage jobs later, here it was, but CITE afforded me the opportunity to, instead of mentor with a principal or get under someone's wing, and let me be clear, I probably wasn't too get under someone's wing a bull at the time, the ability to iterate programs with, you know, the Division of Youth and Community Development have been game changing, not only for me in the city, but for the programs overall. So we really had the flexibility, again, with CITE, to do some big, bold, imaginative things as long as we generated the right data and the right results. And that, to this day, speaks for itself.
That's terrific. Steve, what's the story with the hat? This cheese hat, you wear it everywhere.
What's the story with the hat? So I am the big cheese. And literally, you know, I'll share this story with you. You know, for many years, when I got into work, I was the dean of students at Walton High School. And the kids called me the big cheese. And let me give you some context to Walton High School. In 2004, when I arrived there, and I arrived at Walton High School, sadly, after tragedy in my family, my wife and I lost some children. And literally, I had to circle the wagons around my family, my issues, and my wife and my life, and went into the DOE and just looked for what, you know, how you could get a transfer. And I looked for the nearest vacancy closest to my home in my license area, irregardless, so I could just walk to work. And I took a special ed vacancy at Walton High School. Walton High School in 2004 had a 17% graduation rate.
Holy smokes.
It had 256 felonies in the building. We had 18 armed police officers assigned to the campus and 48 school safety agents assigned to the building. So when you think about the administrative costs of just policing these kids, it was an hour and a half to get into the building through a metal detector in the morning. This was chaos. Remarkably, I walked in, I knew almost every single kid in the building because I was a neighborhood guy and had been doing middle schools for years, and was instantly asked to become dean of students. The students started calling me the big cheese. I was 300 pounds. I was walking around with a slice of pizza and a 44-ounce soda all day. 2 years later, I got into the urban gardening movement, which is another story in and of itself, and became a farmer. And for years, the kids called me the sheriff. Then they called me the big cheese because I was so big. When I started farming, I got a farm hat. And it was real funny to kind of like see, you know, this huge guy wandering around Walton High School with a bunch of gang kids with a big straw hat on his head.
Sure.
And the hat was itchy. I'm not going to lie. The hat was itchy. I hated it, to tell you the truth. And literally, you know, it was what launched my TED Talk, as a matter of fact, for those of you who haven't seen it, which, by the way, is a top 10, 100, I think 1.5 million views later. It's a top 10 teacher talk of all time. But what happened is I got, after graduating CITE, as a matter of fact, I went to my first principals conference somewhere in, I think it was Kenosha, Wisconsin. And, you know, I got off the plane in Kenosha, Wisconsin to go to this principals conference and to meet one of my heroes, Will Allen of Growing Power, a whole separate story, and literally saw this boutique in the airport featuring all this cheese stuff. You know, Wisconsin, the cheese, the Green Bay Packers. And I said, wow, for years, the kids have been calling me the big cheese. How cool is this? Plus the hat is easy. It's flexible. So I started wearing the hat. The kids loved it. The high school kids got a huge kick out of it because it was absolutely goofy. It also reminded them of Curious George, the guy in the yellow hat. And then when I started wearing it with the little kids love it. They want to eat it. They want to wear it. I have a repertoire of over 50,000 pictures of me with children in a cheese hat. They love to wear it. When I went to go meet Miss Obama, as a matter of fact, the first words out of her mouth were, "Stephen, where's the cheese hat?" She knew who I was and she knew about the hat. Secret Service took it from me. But I've worn the hat all around the world. And certainly I stand out. I'm coming. When the kids love to see it, the neighborhood loves to see it. So it's, if this hat can turn a frown upside down and be the beginning of someone's brighter, better day, I am delighted to wear this stupid cheese hat.
That's
but
not
it's become a
stupid at
little
all.
bit fun, but I think I'll take it off. Yeah, I'll take it off for now.
No, I love it. In fact,
All right. Yeah, I know we have pictures of you wearing one. I won't post them, but that's on you.
Yep. I think we did post it. As a matter of fact, I think my company posted it. And
you guys did. I wanted to give you the courtesy. I don't want to out you for wearing the cheese hat, but I applaud you for your courage in doing so.
I wore that cheese hat proudly. As a matter of fact, this is
it's funny. I've got a picture. We've got a picture back here that we're getting rid of post of Mayor Adams with one too. So don't feel bad. Mayor Adams has been a wonderful supporter. So everybody has been a wonderful supporter.
No
and
problem.
Here's the deal, Donald. Who can't get behind children eating healthier food and having access to it? It's kind of a no-brainer.
Well, it's funny, they get behind it, but you did it. I mean, to me, that's the real sort of, shouldn't say you did it. I mean, the idea that you're growing, and you took me around, I was freezing cold. You were very gracious and walked me around to the gardens that you have there that obviously weren't growing right this minute, but you've got gardens right there. You're going to be starting a garden with, I think, some senior housing where the seniors will be able to come out and do some gardening. You've got gardens for the students. You've got gardens right there in the classroom, those machines that you have that sort of water and give light to you're showing the kids in the Bronx who may otherwise have no idea that you can do this, how to do this, or that it can be done.
Well, interestingly enough, as we speak, my next call, believe it or not, I'm very proud to say that Green Bronx Machine is partnering with Quest Diagnostics, the healthcare company. And they are bringing us this year alone to 3 cities across America to touch 15,000 students in year 1 of a pilot. So, as we speak, Green Bronx Machine is in 550 schools across America. It is hyper local, but hyper connected. We're in 6 countries. A week from today, I will literally be keynoting Expo 2020 to 8,000 people in the heart of Dubai. So it is entirely possible. I'm super excited about some of the projects that we have going on, but it's, again, part of what I learned at CITE and part of what I learned is, I would say, baptism by fire, but with an absolute commitment to build something that is local, scalable, replicable, and takes the monetization out of children and school systems and makes quality education at the heart of what we do. My work should not be the gold standard. My work should not be the exception. It should be the baseline entry. It should be the entry point for what is normal. And that, to me, is a big policy discussion, which is probably where a big bulk of my work will go next. But, you got to start somewhere. And for me, I'm starting at ground zero right in my school, but bringing it all back to the point I made. Listen, I come from a community that for years has been food insecure. A lot of the children who live here experience hunger, and this was long before COVID. In the 80s and the 90s, these were some of the most devastated communities in the nation. Now, fast forward 20 years later, the world has gotten better and smarter, but our children have gotten sicker and fatter. The celebritization of food has really, the proliferation of fast food, of cheap food, of high sugar food. Zip code and skin color should not determine the life expectancy, but sadly it does, simply because of what food is available when and how and what we're feeding our children. It is no longer birthplace, it is breakfast. It is no longer lineage, it is lunch, and it is no longer DNA, it is dinner that is killing us. And that more than often than not happens to happen in low income communities and communities of color. Food justice is racial justice.
Yeah.
It's just
Bringing that
simple.
conversation forward
making
is
sure people have an
tremendous.
equitable start. Right. The food
Yeah.
issues are huge. When I was a dean, I would always start, you could say, walk into two kids who were fighting and, who started? They both start fighting again, blaming each other. Or you could say, what'd you have for breakfast? And the kids would look at each other and say, it was either nothing or it was soda and chips, hot Takis, a pack of ring ding ding dongs. I don't want to call it any particular company, but it was nothing that was nutritious. I was 330 pounds, believe it or not. I'm eating the food that was in my community. I knew better. I just couldn't make healthier decisions. And I wound up having a heart attack in school in front of my daughter and was brought to the hospital. I woke up clutching my BlackBerry and said, man, something has to change. I was diabetic. I was on medication. I had a cirrhotic liver. All of this is because, I kept, cheap and convenient is oftentimes very expensive and deadly. And, we need to realize that. So food to me was an absolutely critical lens to get involved in with children. And then, of course, now whole food, good food, fresh food is at the epicenter of what high performance looks like. But also there's an appetite for it in the cities. I want to shout out Whole Kids and Whole Foods for supporting us. When my students from the South Bronx, basically we spent our lives shopping in bodegas. I brought 20 gang members into Whole Foods, the first one that opened in New York City on 96th Street. And basically the security guard had a heart attack. He didn't know what he was going to do with me and those 20 kids. And my 20 kids said, that's a security agent? That's a security guard? We could eat that guy for breakfast. And then literally we saw all this food, vegetables and fruit that was being sold for top dollar. And that was game changing. In 2007, I gave a talk with these kids at Columbia University called From Crack to Cucumbers. And I brought down 17 children, young adults who were working with me, who were formerly involved in the drug trade across Washington Heights, Harlem, the South Bronx, and others in New York City, and somehow got engaged and involved in the green economy. And, no matter what your position is on the legalization of drugs or the use of drugs, I think we can all agree that communities are safer when young people are selling cucumbers instead of drugs. And the effect that this had on their lives, being stewards of the environment, caretakers of nature, able to steward something from seed to harvest with cultivation in the middle, was absolutely critical for them and their self-esteem. So it's been game changing. We haven't looked back since. I couldn't be prouder. We have a documentary soon to be coming out called Generation Growth. You can see the trailer of it on the Green Bronx Machine website. And I couldn't be prouder, not of my story, but of the story of when you put a seed in a child's hand and you make a promise that they're going to grow something greater. Yeah, similarly, sure. On the workforce development side, when you look at, the benefit of horticultural therapy and plant therapy for veterans, for seniors, for displaced workers, this is a workforce opportunity as we are seeing farms becoming urban farms and city farms become the new norm. That presents a tremendous opportunity. And all one has to do is look at, for example, Gotham Greens, one of our most efficacious and benevolent partners. Look at the business that they built, not only here in New York City, but across the nation. So we're on to something here. People are getting hip. Recently, we hosted both Dr. Betty Rosa and the New York State Ag Commissioner, Richard Ball, here in this classroom. You can see the interview and the post up on my LinkedIn page and see what their thoughts are about this program and how CTE and local food systems represent an opportunity for real economic growth and environmental sustainability for all communities. Absolutely. So it's a very opportune moment at a very critical time.
Yeah. So for our listeners, CTE is Career and Technical Education. And I think this conversation calls for a follow-up. You're doing so many great things, Stephen. We couldn't be prouder of you, and the communities need you and clearly love you. So I love the work that you do. I'm really interested in staying engaged with the project. Whether it's for a podcast or just because I really am interested in the work and following this and getting involved. I look forward to it. We're out of time today. But before we close, is there anything that you want to add? Any last thoughts? Anything you want our listeners to hear?
Donald, I'm humbled and grateful. And, we had a great conversation when you came. I was just relieved I didn't owe CITE any money. I thought maybe I forgot to make a payment. But as I look at you, this work speaks to three things, and those three words are on your banner right behind you: community, service, and vision. And that's what this is about: passion, purpose, and hope. So I'm honored to have spent some time with you today. For those of you who are out there and want to get involved, go to the Green Bronx Machine website. You can learn more about me at Stephen Ritz at my website, Stephen, STEPHENRITZ.com. Please, teachers, I urge you to buy a copy of this book, The Power of a Plan. Please buy it from the Green Bronx Machine website, because 100% of the proceeds support us hiring parents out of public housing to work here in schools. But the book comes with a double your money back guarantee. If you don't like it, I'll buy it back for twice the price, literally.
Wow.
But it's my story of passion, purpose, of hope, which is your story of passion, purpose, and hope. And, I do want to take a moment to thank each and every listener. These 2 years, I don't even want to review what they are. But for those of you showing up, growing up, and serving our children, I thank you. They thank you. And remember, the greatest lever this nation has for equity is public education. And I'm proud to wear that hat and proud to be a part of this movement. And I urge you to follow us and join us and grow something greater. Come visit the classroom. It's a lot of fun. I'm always a phone call and email message away.
Steve, thank you very much for taking the time today. We really appreciate it. I think it's going to benefit our listeners, and I look forward to the next conversation. All right. Take care now.
You got it. See you soon.